True crime enthusiasts, it's Rabia Chaudhry
and Ellen Marsh.
You are invited to join us on Rabia and Ellen Solve the Case, a true crime talk show.
Grab a front row seat as we, along with our special celebrity guests, dissect our favorite true crime cases every other Thursday.
And between those episodes, join us as we talk about current true crime headlines in our About Damn Crime series.
Skip the ordinary and dive into extraordinary investigations and conversations with us.
Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform, and let's unravel these captivating stories together.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 353 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah.
We had some tornadoes here this week.
Little Dorothy activity?
Yeah, 5 tornadoes touched down. Some of them close to us, some of them a little bit farther away, but all 5 around the area.
Did you chase the storms?
No. Like in Twister, I would never do that.
No?
Tornadoes are so dangerous, man. They scare me. They scare me. Let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. We had Legista Branham.
Hey, Branham.
Jacqueline Guman.
Hey, Jacqueline.
Jan.
What's going on, Jan?
Kevin Twiddle.
Hey, there's Kevin.
Personally victimized by Regina George.
Sounds like a Mean Girls thing.
Yeah, and you got that on Patreon, and I was actually shocked that you knew that.
Very smart when it comes to movies.
You
and
are.
shows.
You are.
Yeah.
I've learned that throughout the years. Ron Kinman.
What's up, Ron?
Matt O.
Hey, Matt.
Amanda Mitchell.
Well, thanks, Amanda.
Patricia Cook.
Hey, there's Patricia.
Melanie Fuentes.
Oh, what's up, Melanie?
Janet Wiseman.
Hey, Janet.
And Ilea C.
Hi, Aaliyah.
Yeah. And then we go back into the vault. This week we selected Cheryl Ann Reed.
What's going on, Cheryl Ann Reed? Thank you.
Yeah, so we appreciate the new support, the continued support. Gibbs, we have an episode out right now on True Crime All the Time where we're talking about Gregory Harris. And this was a guy who was married to a woman named Chiquita, who was a young, successful, very successful defense attorney.
Yes.
And she was found murdered in her downtown Baton Rouge, Louisiana office. And, you know, the police set their sights on her husband, Greg. All signs pointed to him, but the defense made some compelling arguments. So
some pretty strong arguments.
It's a very interesting episode.
And the whole jury issue is interesting.
Oh, yeah, there is a wrinkle.
Yes.
That happens with the jury that is interesting as well. All right, buddy, are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I'm ready.
We are talking about the mysterious disappearance and death of Robert Hoagland. Robert Hoagland was a pretty normal family man from Newtown, Connecticut. He disappeared without a trace on July 28, 2013. 9 years later, he was located after he died unexpectedly at a home in upstate New York. So basically, he'd been living under an alias and had started a new life. But no one knows why Robert left his home and chose to live less than 100 miles away from the family who spent years searching for him.
Bizarre.
It's very bizarre, and we're going to get into all the details.
Have you ever thought about... I know you haven't.
This is going to be good. Go ahead.
What it'd be like to start a new life over underneath an alias and just kind of like a new chapter.
No, because I feel like I would be starting from scratch.
Yeah.
And I love my wife.
Well, of course.
I love my kids. So obviously that would be a no starter for me. But even, let's just say I wasn't married and I didn't have kids.
Right.
And I really had very little connections. Well, I guess then why would I need to mysteriously disappear? I could just move and take all my money with me.
That's true. It's a good point.
So, but I don't understand that kind of starting from scratch idea.
I guess you'd have to really dislike your current situation.
Oh, you would have to. Or be fearful for your life, or there would have to be some reason.
Right. To flee your significant other and maybe kids.
Robert Hoagland, who went by the nickname Hoagie, was born on June 9th, 1963. He was married to Lori Hoagland. They had 3 children together, Chris, Max, and Sam, who were in their 20s when their dad went missing.
Nicknames are funny, but to be named after a sandwich.
Yeah, Hoagie.
Yeah.
Lori taught culinary arts at Newtown High, and Robert spent many years working as a professional chef. Lori and Robert separated for 2 years at one point in their marriage, but they decided they wanted to stay together and were planning their retirement together in the time leading up to Robert's disappearance.
I'm just thinking that dinner time around there had to be pretty good.
With a professional chef and a wife and mother who taught culinary arts?
Yeah.
I would think so. But I wonder how many people, separate for as long as 2 years and then ultimately make the decision that, no, we want to stay together. We want to spend the rest of our lives together. 2 years is a long time.
It is. But I also think it's a substantial amount of time for you to get out there, be away from this partner. And if you feel like you want to see, was there other opportunities for me? Should I be looking at other things to make sure this is the right person I want to be with?
By other things, it sounds like you are saying play the field, go out on dates, meet other women.
Or in her case, meet other men.
Yeah, we don't know who initiated the separation. I just thought that was a long time to then come back and decide that you want to spend the rest of your lives together. But to your point, because it is such a long time, you would probably be pretty sure at that point.
I would think you'd have to be pretty good with that decision.
Lori told the News Times, after 2 years, we knew we loved each other and he moved back home. If he wanted out of the marriage, all he would have to say is that he wanted out of the marriage. But that was not remotely where we were. And I think this 2-year separation kind of is even a bigger deal when we know that he's going to disappear.
Right.
Why get back together to then later just leave?
It doesn't really add up.
Doesn't seem to.
But also, it's easy, I think, sometimes for people to say, if you want out of this relationship, just say so. If you want out of this marriage, just say so. Sometimes I don't think it's that easy.
Well, I don't think it's ever as easy as just saying it.
Right.
Because there are a lot of factors, many of which you and I have talked about before. There's the financial issues. There's all of that. Their son, Max, struggled with addiction. This was difficult for the family, but Lori told the Albany Times-Union that she and Robert were completely in tandem about how to help Max. She added, it was definitely a challenging situation, but not one so desperate that he'd just leave. So again, a lot of the things that she's talking with the paper about are related to, Robert ultimately leaving.
But that's according to her.
Yes. That's her thoughts on it.
Right. And I think it would be so tough to deal with a child that had an addiction issue. It could put some additional stress into your relationship.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Now, she's saying they were completely in tandem, which I think it would be very important.
Yes.
If you differed on how you thought, your child should be helped, should we give the child money? Should we not give them money because then we're just enabling them? You could see a lot of arguments that could stem from not being on the same page.
Right.
Should we pay for rehab? Should we, put our foot down and say you have to go to rehab or something like that? Robert eventually left the restaurant industry to spend more time with his family. He worked part-time as a real estate appraiser and worked in a friend's law office in Bridgeport. According to the News Times, at the time of his disappearance, Robert was concerned about Max's struggles with substance abuse and was planning to take him on a trip. So Yeah, I'm sure he was concerned, but back to what Lori said, was it a concern that would have caused him to just up and leave? And my thought is if he was concerned, would he want to be out of his life and not be able to help him? So, I mean, these are all things we're going to have to look at.
Absolutely.
As we go along. July 28th, 2013 was a normal Sunday for Robert Hoagland. He was up early that morning, around 6:45 a.m. He went to a local bagel shop called Bagel Delight and bought half a tank of gas at a mobile station on Churchill Road in Newtown. He also purchased a map of the eastern U.S. Robert was captured on surveillance video at the gas station. Okay, bagels seems pretty normal. You've got to fill up, the car.
Sure.
The map of the eastern U.S. kind of stands out.
It does.
A little bit. Number one, how many people were using maps by 2013?
Fairly limited.
I would think so. I mean, we had iPhones. We had smartphones that had map apps on them, right, by 2013.
Which are great if you have a destination in mind already.
That's true.
But if you wanted to randomly select, maybe a map comes in handy.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, for directions, it wouldn't have beaten any of the technology that was out there.
Right.
Robert came home and ate breakfast with his son Max. He played online Scrabble, paid some bills, and then went outside to mow his lawn. So I said this was a pretty normal Sunday. Now, I don't get up at 6:45 a.m. on Sundays, but outside of that, it does seem pretty normal.
Yeah.
Outside of that and buying the map.
I mean, went out and started cutting his grass. Can't get more normal than that.
Robert stopped mowing to say goodbye to Max, who said he was leaving for a few hours, and took one of the family vehicles. A neighbor saw them talking in the yard. Lori Hoagland was not at the house that day. She was finishing up a 17-day trip to Turkey with her friends and flew home on July 29th. Robert was supposed to pick her up at the JFK airport in New York City. That's a heck of a trip.
That is a heck of a trip.
17 days to Turkey.
I mean, I got to take care of the kids for 17 days.
That's what us guys would be thinking. But now she was a teacher, right? So she had the summers off.
Yeah.
She could go on that long of a trip. Most of us don't get that much time off at one single time. Lori texted Robert when she landed and tried calling him, but he didn't answer. She wasn't concerned because Robert often let his phone die. She figured he was caught in traffic and would be there eventually, but he never showed up.
Oh, we all know that person that doesn't like to keep their phone charged.
Yeah, you've heard me talk about the app that I use to kind of keep track of everybody in the family. It even has like an indicator that tells you how much battery each person's phone has.
So you can say, hey, you need to plug your phone in.
I text them all the time at night. Hey, make sure you plug your phone in or you're going to wake up with a dead phone.
I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but it's the worst. When you are supposed to be picked up at the airport by somebody, you've been on these long, grueling flights. You just want to get home, maybe get in your own bed, and the person that's supposed to be there doesn't show up.
No, I don't think I've ever had that happen because I've almost always driven to the airport, I think.
Yeah.
When I've gone places by myself. Lori waited 2 hours before she took a cab to a relative's home in Brooklyn. She contacted the wife of Robert's boss and learned that he didn't go to work that day. Lori was suspicious when she came home and discovered that Robert's Mini Cooper was in the driveway, but he wasn't home.
Well, I think that's the time to start worrying.
Yeah, couple that with the fact that he didn't come pick her up.
Right. And didn't go to work that day.
Lori reported her husband missing that day. She told the police that she and Robert emailed each other throughout her trip and spoke to each other on the night of July 27th. Robert left behind both pairs of his favorite loafers, his phone, car, passport, and blood pressure medication.
I think the concern would be the phone, the car, and the passport.
No, I was thinking the blood pressure medication.
No, you're right. And the blood pressure medication, too. The favorite loafers, I don't know if that would be such a big deal.
Yeah, I don't think my wife would say, oh, my husband, I can't find my husband, and his favorite pair of shoes are here.
Right.
I don't have what you would call favorite pairs of shoes. I only have a few pairs anyways. The same day his father was reported missing, Max Hoagland was arrested for misdemeanor trespassing in Bridgeport. Max's vehicle was seen parked in an area with no trespassing signs that was known for drug activity. Max told officers he was there to buy drugs and said he had permission to use the car. Officers contacted Lori, and she told them he did not have permission to use the car. There was no evidence his activities or associates had anything to do with Robert's disappearance.
Well, I think you have to ask those questions, though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're going to look at the wife, although she's been gone for 17 days, but you're still going to look at her. But when you have a son that is into drugs and is associating, let's say, with some questionable individuals, you have to ask the question, could any of those activities have something to do with the disappearance of Robert?
Yeah.
On August 15th, Max pleaded guilty to the charge and was released from jail. Meanwhile, the police tracked Robert's movements to the gas station and bagel shop and learned that Max was the last person to see his father at home. But it turned out that the gas, bagels, and map were Robert's last purchases on his credit card. Authorities searched the woods and trails around the family home, but found nothing. The police learned that Robert withdrew $600 from his bank account on July 25th. The Thursday before he went missing, Lori told the News-Times that she thought this was strange and questioned why Robert would withdraw such a small amount if he were going to run away.
That's a good point.
$600 is not going to get you very far.
No.
If that's all you have to your name. The family initially thought Robert's wallet was missing because they couldn't find it, which led them to consider the possibility that he left on his own. However, Robert showed no signs of someone who was planning on running away from his family.
It doesn't really make sense when you think about the activities he did that day. Online Scrabble and paying some bills online. And then, look, if I was going to run away, I don't think I'd be mowing my grass.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first thing on my list. But my thought is, even more so than that stuff, you would expect to see some type of planning.
Right.
Maybe packing some clothes or some things missing from the house that someone would take with them. They didn't find any of that stuff.
No.
10 days after Robert went missing, Lori found his wallet and keys hidden under a doll on a chair in their bedroom. And this was deeply upsetting to the family because it caused them to fear something terrible had happened to Robert.
I mean, you have to think about that. Robert leaving his phone and medication and other critical items. It's definitely going to make his kids and his wife wonder, did someone take Robert? Is he okay? And it's just going to cause an intense worry.
Well, and especially after 10 days, right? You would expect to have heard from him by now. If he just went off, let's say he was frustrated and just needed to get away to clear his head, at the very least, you would think he would make a phone call at some point and say, hey, I went to a motel. I just needed to clear my head. But again, why wouldn't he take his wallet? Why wouldn't he take his car, his phone,
Right.
Stuff like that?
And why only $600?
There were alleged sightings of Robert in Connecticut and Rhode Island, but these ended up being false leads. A witness in West Warwick, Rhode Island, thought they saw someone matching Robert's description. In August 2013, the man was carrying a large backpack and wearing a light-colored shirt and was seen walking near Route 177 near the I-95 exit and entrance ramps. In September, Department of Transportation workers in West Greenwich, Rhode Island, thought they saw Robert. A man fitting his description was seen with a large backpack walking on Route 165 from Rhode Island towards Connecticut.
You know, it's interesting how many people out there can potentially look like somebody else. I mean, I get people tell me all the time that they saw somebody that looked like me. I was just at like a local sports bar not too long ago for a little happy hour with the office when my boss was in town. And I kid you not, I remember looking over at another table and I saw a guy. I thought, it kind of looks like me.
You were like, damn, that's a good looking guy.
And he looked back, we looked back, we made it, like, hey. And I was like, I don't like that.
You got a doppelganger.
I don't like that. But I can see where people can potentially say, I think we saw this guy. It looked like that guy.
Well, especially if you didn't know the person and all you had was a description, or you saw a picture for a brief moment on the television.
Right.
Could you then later see someone and say, that really looks like the person I saw? Yeah, I could see that happening. True Crime All the Time Unsolved is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming. Like when your favorite podcast is playing and the person next to you is talking and your car fan is blasting, all while you're trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of comparing rates so you can find a great rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try and you might just find getting the rate and coverage you deserve is easy. All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverages you want, like comprehensive and collision coverage or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies all lined up and ready to compare. So it's simple to choose the rate and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates. Quote at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. You know that's the sound of another sale on your online Shopify store. But did you know Shopify powers selling in person too? That's right. Shopify is the sound of selling everywhere. Online, in-store, on social media, and beyond. Shopify POS is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers in line and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point-of-sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/unsolved. All lowercase. Go to shopify.com/unsolved to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/unsolved.
This is your before and after story. Southeastern College can help you prepare for a secure and fulfilling career in the growing healthcare field. We offer a wide range of careers to choose from. So whether you want to be a medical assistant, medical billing and coding specialist, nurse, surgical technologist, or another healthcare career, we've got you covered. Become a vital part of a healthcare team and make a real difference. Southeastern College, your future is bright. Visit sec.edu to get started.
On September 10th, a police spokesman told the Newtown Bee that the sighting near I-95 and Route 117 in Warwick was a case of mistaken identity. Police Chief Michael Kehoe told the outlet, "We're looking at all aspects of his disappearance. It's a very difficult investigation. We have no leads."
Well, that's why it's very difficult. You have no leads.
Yeah, and he's being brutally honest, right? But, I think a lot of investigations are like this. If you don't have any leads to run down, what do you do? Where do you go from? Once you've questioned the people that are closest to the person who has disappeared, at a certain point, you've checked surveillance video of known places. What else do you do? It's almost like you're waiting for a break in the case or you're waiting for a tip to come in, something you can check out.
Yeah, because he's not using credit cards. He doesn't have his phone.
No, there's no trail.
And he didn't take his car that can be maybe picked up on a camera somewhere or somehow ID'd.
On September 1st, the police did a sonar search of Lake Zor in Connecticut to determine if Robert's body could be there. They also brought in search dogs, but they didn't find any human remains. And I thought that was interesting just for the fact that they chose to do that. And I wonder if it was based on some type of tip or it was just a hunch.
Yeah, it could have just been like, hey, we've exhausted all efforts. The only thing we haven't done yet is look in that lake over there. Let's go ahead and zero in on that so we can check it off the list.
Lori and the family did their own searches and posted online about the case to spread awareness. And I do think this is something that kind of separates the newer cases from, let's say, the pre-internet, pre-social media cases. You have the ability now to reach a pretty large audience.
You do.
Via social media. You think about cases when we were younger, people were making up flyers and posting them around town, things like that, because what else could you do? Maybe you could get the local television station to do a story, but social media opens up a ton of avenues.
Oh, yeah. Instagram and Facebook. I wonder if when you put it on TikTok, do you have to do a little dance while you talk about it?
I don't know. TikTok is the one thing that I don't use because everything I've seen from my kids has been nothing but fluff. I'll call it. It's got nothing to it.
Yeah.
There's no substance. It's kids lip syncing, dancing, things that I don't care about.
Maybe one day they'll get you to be a TikToker.
Maybe, but I do not think so. At one point, the police thought Robert might have traveled all the way to the West Coast because he reportedly had connections in California. Cities like Hollywood, Norco, Diamond Bar, Glendora, and Vallecito. Long ways away, right? Connecticut to California.
It's a hike and a half.
On January 20th, 2014, there was a sighting at a Savor store in Brookfield, Connecticut, which is less than 15 minutes from Newtown. A witness saw a man leave in a vehicle with New York license plates. The surveillance footage wasn't clear enough for authorities to make an identification.
But pretty close to home if that's the case.
Yeah, but you have to then wonder why the New York license plate. If that was Robert, was he now living in New York? And if so, why was he in Brookfield, Connecticut?
Maybe that Savor store carried the only food item that he really wanted to get his hands on.
So he had to drive all the way to Brookfield?
Yeah.
Lori told the News Times 6 months after Robert disappeared. Obviously, after 6 months, there aren't many leads anymore. We continue to be strong in our conviction that he would never just run away. But there's no proof either way.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be frustrating. Because you really don't want to think that your husband just checked out and said, I'm out of here and I'm going to make you suffer at the same time. Not just miss me, but worry that something bad happened to me. That's what I'm going to do to you guys.
Yeah, and you don't want to believe that something bad happened either. But after 6 months, you got to start to believe something.
Yeah.
At least in the back of your mind. You may not want to admit it, but when somebody's been gone for 6 months, it doesn't seem like a good sign.
Yeah, I think you have to put it up on the wall, right? Why did he leave me? Why did he leave me and the kids versus what potentially could have happened bad?
Did somebody take him? Did somebody, do something bad to him? Lori spoke about how she and her son sat together and tried to figure out reasons why Robert would leave. They also thought about all the horrible possibilities of what could have happened to him. She said she hoped that if her husband was dead, someone would find his remains one day. So you talked about something very interesting to me, which is if Robert makes this decision to leave voluntarily, he really is doing so with the knowledge that he has to be putting his family through hell.
Yeah. If that's the case, it's really a shitty move.
Anybody who does that has to know what they're doing to their family, their wife, their kids, the worry, the sleepless nights, the guilt. Did I do something wrong? All of that you're putting on people who you supposedly love.
I don't know if you could get more selfish than that, though.
No. Robert was allegedly seen at the Putnam County Correctional Facility in Carmel, New York on July 24th, 2014. Someone visiting an inmate thought they saw Robert walking into the building. The man left after just 2 minutes. No footage inside the facility captured his movements. Exterior surveillance footage didn't help with identification. So there have been a number of sightings or alleged sightings of Robert Hoagland. Now, were any of them real? We don't know.
But it's got to be enough to give the family hope.
Well, this one in New York, coupled with the fact that someone thought they saw him with New York plates, that's kind of intriguing.
Yeah.
In November 2014, the search turned to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, after the police received a tip that Robert may be working in a restaurant there. And I do think, given his past as a chef, that would be something that you'd really want to run down. Because would it be easier in some restaurants to get a job without maybe having all of the identification that you would need? Let's say if you were applying to be a bank teller.
Right.
And, you know, if it's not a chain restaurant, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I just keep thinking about how the family has to feel every time they hear something like this. It's just going to give you this rush of hope. Hey, maybe they found Dad.
But at the same time, with that rush of hope, doesn't there have to be some, you know, why would he just up and leave us?
Maybe you kind of hope, and I hate to say it, but that scenario where we had that one guy that hit his head and for so many years forgot that who he was and that he had a family.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
He said he did.
Yeah. And had a whole nother life going on for a very long period of time. And then one day came back and walked into his front door and said, "Hey, family, I'm back."
Yeah. I mean, it's possible.
Yeah.
Right. There are a lot of possibilities here. But again, you're going to be thinking about all of them. And you're going to be thinking about, you know, did I do something that could have caused him to just walk out? And then, you know, the kids as well. Why would Dad just leave us?
I'm sure it weighed on Max. You know, at that time he was having some trouble.
Yeah. And did my troubles have something to do with Dad leaving?
Yeah.
In May 2016, Robert's case was featured on the well-known show Disappeared. During the episode, it was reported that Robert met with some shady men a few days before he disappeared. Max claimed they stole the family's computers. According to the News-Times, the police said Max brought the laptops to an abandoned building in Bridgeport the same week Robert went missing. Robert suspected the laptops were stolen or sold in exchange for drugs. He confronted the men inside an old factory where they often hung out. These men denied stealing the computers, and there was no evidence linking them to Robert's disappearance. Lori and other friends said if Robert thought Max or his family was in danger, he would have confronted that person. Lori told the News-Times, "I've seen him chase people down the street with baseball bats."
Wonder who that sounds like.
I don't know. But again, this kind of does go back to Max. And I'm not putting blame on Max in any way, but we do know people battling with substance abuse problems sometimes sell their family stuff.
Sure.
To get a fix.
It's quick cash. You know, grab some of the electronics in the family home, take them to somebody, they'll give you a few bucks for them so you can turn around and buy your next fix.
Or they'll trade them for drugs. Exactly. or whatever. So you could see why police would run down this angle, especially with the details that have come out. Viewers learned that when the police looked at Robert's work computer, they found he reportedly searched for an address in Rhode Island, but this turned out to be another dead end. The police also looked at his personal computer, but during the month before he disappeared, Robert Lee apparently downloaded a program designed to clear all internet searches.
Well, I know you use that similar software.
Yeah, I do.
For certain reasons.
I've talked about, my fear of dying, and we've talked about that pact that we would clear each other's searches if that ever happened.
Yeah, and I think you would, but just in case you don't, I always register my laptop underneath your name.
Oh, okay.
It just makes it simpler.
That makes a lot of sense. Robert Hoagland was finally located 9 years after he disappeared, but his discovery left his family and investigators with far more questions than answers. On December 5th, 2022, 59-year-old Robert Hoagland was found dead in Rock Hill, a hamlet in upstate New York. Rock Hill is a small town at the base of the Catskill Mountains, located just 90 miles from Newtown.
Only 90 miles, just up the road.
It's an hour and a half if you're driving slowly.
Yeah, it's an hour and a half.
Robert was identified because the police found paperwork with his real name on it. He had been living in Sullivan County, New York since November 2013 under the alias Richard King. He maintained a low profile and never got in trouble with the police, which I think is very important if you're, I don't even want to call it on the run, but he is kind of on the run,
right.
Not from the law so much, but he's trying to not be discovered. Well, you do need to keep a low profile, and you definitely need to not get in trouble with police. You're going to be discovered pretty quickly.
And change your name from Robert Hoagland to Dick King.
Yeah, I mean, you can pick another name, but Dick King is pretty cool.
I just think you should add "the" in front of it.
Make it very regal.
Yes.
Okay. There were no signs of foul play in his death. Robert's roommate, who knew him only by his alias, called 911 at 3 p.m. on December 5th to report that Richard was having a medical emergency. Robert's exact cause of death was unknown. Newtown detectives confirmed Robert's identity the day after his death and confirmed there was no criminal aspect to his disappearance. Christopher Hoagland told NBC at the time, "It's pretty confusing. We're trying to handle it right now, to be honest. Haven't really figured out any details."
I bet. It has to be extremely confusing.
Yeah, for Lori, the kids, okay, Dad was alive. He's now dead, but he just left us. Why?
And I would think you're sitting there going, and we know that he had to see that we were looking for him.
Oh, there's no doubt there would have been, media. He probably would have seen being only 90 miles away.
Yeah. I just wonder if there comes a point where you leave because you think it's the thing you need to do. And at some point, because you're gone so long, you just say, you know what? It's just better if I just don't go back.
Yeah, I could see that scenario where maybe he didn't plan on leaving forever.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, it's almost like if I go back now, how am I going to explain?
Right.
Why I've been away for as long as I've been? How is my family going to react? They're never going to really see me or look at me the same way. Robert's roommate, a 46-year-old music teacher identified as David, spoke to the Albany Times-Union in December 2022. The two men lived together for nearly a decade. David said about Robert, "I just want people to know there was nothing strange about his life, other than the fact that he was able to disappear for 9 years."
That's a big, strange thing, though.
The fact that he was able to disappear for 9 years. Yeah. David met Richard King. When Richard responded to his ad for a roommate, David moved to Rock Hill in 2012 to be closer to work. And in the fall of 2013, he'd recently separated from his wife. He placed an ad on Craigslist to find a roommate. Richard King responded and told him he was new to the area. David felt a little uncertain about letting him move in because Richard couldn't give him any ID. He said he left everything behind.
Well, he was correct.
Yeah, he didn't lie about either of those.
No.
He was new to the area, and he had left everything behind,
Including his wife and kids.
Richard did mention that he was a real estate appraiser and moved to Rock Hill after a bitter divorce. He was working for Empire Inspections and Appraisals in Middletown, New York, and drove a company car. The Times-Union reported that no one by the name Richard King or Robert Hoagland is licensed as a residential real estate appraiser in New York. However, the company still hired him. The state DMV also had no record of issuing any ID to a man named Richard King, born in June 1963. So, I mean, I think you have to ask the question there, and it does come up from time to time. What type of vetting process, if any, did this company have?
Exactly. I mean, he could probably talk shop because he knew how to do appraisal work.
Yeah, he had done the job, but you would think at the very least you'd have to show an ID. And for that type of job, you would think you would need to show your license.
Yeah, your certification, your license, that actually goes on the appraisal form.
An employee of the company who knew David vouched for Richard, and the two men made a rental agreement. One of Richard's coworkers told the Times-Union, "If it helps, we all thought that Rich was a good guy. Well, we knew him as Rich, not Dick, as you had thought."
Well, that's his fault for not going with that. But I get it. These guys can seem like a super guy, like hey, this guy's great. He's awesome. He's such a nice guy.
Maybe he was.
But he had this one little piece that he wasn't sharing with everybody. And does it make him not a nice guy?
Not nice to his family.
Right.
I mean, you'd have to say that. What he did to his family was pretty horrible.
Absolutely.
If he wanted out, he could have just told them,
yeah,
"Hey, I don't want to be married anymore. I'm leaving. I don't want to be a dad anymore," I guess he would have had to have said. But it almost seems very cowardly to me to just run off and leave.
Yeah, I think, this is like a spot for a PSA, like, don't be a dick king, If you left your family and they were worried about you, pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I just don't want to be around you guys anymore. I'm somewhere. Don't worry about me. Good life to you."
Yeah, I just, most people would pronounce it Dick King. You keep putting the emphasis on the first word and it sounds very strange. Richard moved into a spare room in David's rental home. This violated David's lease because he and his wife were the legal tenants and subleasing was prohibited. And this is what really allowed Robert Hoagland to avoid a credit check, meaning he really didn't have to show any ID or go through any type of credit check. So if you're on the run, you have to find these very certain types of situations. Right? You have to get a place to live where you don't have to show all these valid forms of ID. You don't have to go through a credit check. You got to find a job at a place that's willing to, or routinely is kind of lax on their vetting process.
I just think Robert was a pretty smart guy to figure all this out and to stay off the radar up until the day he died.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. What we don't know is how many jobs or employers he had to go through before he found one that would allow him, to work without showing all this, and how many places to live he had to look at to find the place that would allow him to get in without, going through something that would blow up his alias. David's landlord told the Times-Union that David renewed his lease in 2016, but didn't mention his roommate. David recalled that Richard didn't bring much with him, just a small bed and some clothes.
Travel light.
Well, he only had $650 to start with, so 600. Yeah, you're right. And so that plus whatever he was making at his job is all he had. According to David, he said he was divorced, his children were adults, and he was just looking to start a new life. So I was able to kind of help him out. The two men became close friends over the years. David called Robert, aka Richard, a brother. During the interview, they had Sunday dinners together and gave each other gifts at Christmas. Richard taught David how to cook. David talked about him in phone calls with his mother. She was happy that he had a good friend. So, I mean, these guys became very good friends.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to happen when you kind of live together for, almost 10 years.
Yeah, you're going to build some type of good relationship. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to survive each other for that long of time. And
I think the relationship was really good because David purchased a home in 2020 and Robert moved in with him.
Well, it tells you a lot right there.
David initially wanted a roommate because he needed help with rent. As he began to earn more at the school he worked for and had some success with his music career, he asked Richard to help with utilities only. Richard always paid him cash. David also put Richard on his phone plan and gave him an old iPhone because he didn't have a good cell phone.
Yeah, because he left his previous phone at home, his original home.
Well, and, if you don't want to go through the full-blown kind of credit check, what type of phones are you able to get? Kind of the flip burner phone?
Exactly.
So this way he gets an iPhone and doesn't have to, set up his own plan. He really had the perfect situation.
He did, and he ended up being friends with this guy.
But it also sounds like David needed a friend. He liked Robert, aka Richard, in his life. He must have to do all, these types of things for him. Although they were close, Richard didn't talk much about his life. Before he got divorced, he mentioned a family trip to Hilton Head, South Carolina, and working with one of his sons on a car. He also told David that one of his sons struggled with addiction. So he did tell a lot of truths in some of the talks.
Well, it makes it easier to hold the lie together when you trinkle some truth in there too.
Did you say trinkle?
I did.
Okay. So is that a cross between sprinkle and trickle? That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trinkle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
We're going to have to add that to the Gibby dictionary.
It's a perfect word.
Although Robert Hoagland tried to keep a low profile, he wasn't reclusive. From 2017 to 2019, Robert volunteered at the town's soup kitchen for Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners. He once posed in a group photo that was published by the Times Union.
Risky.
That is risky. But, you talked about, is this a good guy? And I think opinions are going to vary. Obviously, not a good guy to just run out on your family.
Right.
That part is a given. But then you look at his life, he wasn't doing bad things. He was actually, volunteering at a soup kitchen. He was working. He was, living his life.
I just think in his head, for whatever reason, he thought, well, my kids are adults. They don't need me. They're adults. My job was to get them to 18. Once they're 18, they're on their own. Maybe that's how he thought. And maybe he thinks, because him and his wife were separated for a few years, or a couple years, that he wasn't married in his mind, and that's how he could justify leaving them. It's still a pretty shitty way to do it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, why not have that conversation like, hey, honey, babe, things aren't working out. I'm going to go ahead and move out. Hey, boys, guess what? I'm going to move because you're 18, 20, 22, whatever ages you all are now. Good luck to you. Wish you luck. I'm out of here. But he doesn't do any of that. He just quietly walks away.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I think it's very, very possible. And he actually could have thought that the way that he did it was better for them. Sometimes people in their minds convince themselves of things that we know not to be true.
That's true.
And so, or maybe he just didn't like confrontation.
Well, that's a big yes for a lot of people.
And didn't want to go through the conversations that you just talked about, which would have been tough.
Sure.
But we know would have been the right thing to do if that was your plan. Program administrator Kathy Kreider told the Times Union he was a little, I'm going to say quirky. In the beginning, maybe, it took him a while to warm up. He seemed more at ease the next time he volunteered, and seemed kind and passionate about the work he was doing. So it's almost like we're talking about two different guys, right? Yeah. There's the Robert Hoagland that left his wife and kids kind of high and dry. And then there's Richard King, or as you would call him, Dick King, who was a good roommate, was volunteering at a soup kitchen.
Sounds like he performed well at work because they kept him on.
Yeah.
So he was doing all the things that a good person would seem like they would do.
He wasn't getting in trouble with the law or anything like that. 6 months before he died, Richard told David that he went to a doctor and the doctor instructed him to change his diet. The two men normally ate things like steak and ribs for Sunday dinners, but they started having seafood and vegetables instead.
Oh, those darn vegetables.
I know.
Got to add those in to make things healthy.
What's wrong with steak and ribs?
That's your go-to.
That's my main diet. Towards the end of their time together, Richard told David he might start receiving mail in another person's name, but he didn't offer any type of explanation. David didn't want to pry, but he wondered if it had to do with Richard's medical problems as his health had started to decline.
I don't know. If I had a roommate that I've been friends with for 10 years, almost 10 years, and they said, hey, I'm going to probably get some mail in another person's name, I don't know. I think I'd probably pry.
Yeah, there's a part of me that thinks that maybe David kind of just assumed there was something going on.
Yeah.
But knew that Richard didn't want to talk about it, so it was kind of pointless to bring it up. And he thought, he's a good guy, whatever it is that he's escaping.
Let him do his thing.
Yeah, is what it is. Yeah. There's a part of me that believes that's possible.
Sure.
But I also had this question of, how do you go to the doctor as Richard King? You're obviously going to be a new patient and you're not going to have any medical history at all.
Well, I mean, you can make some type of story up on why you don't have a history, and just hope that they believe it.
I've never been to the doctor before in my life.
Yeah.
Because what else are you going to say? I guess that's possible. David went to bed early on the night of December 2nd, 2022, because he had a music gig in New York City the next day. Richard came home after he went to sleep. Robert was captured by David's home security footage entering the house. He held his back as if he were in pain. Richard often worked on Saturdays, so David was surprised to see his car in the garage. When he left to go to the city, he assumed his roommate was taking the day off. He didn't see or hear from Richard all day. David reviewed his home security footage and saw that Richard came home Friday night. Then Richard skipped their Sunday dinner, which was highly unusual. By Monday, David was extremely worried. Richard normally left for work before David did, so when he saw his car in the garage, he knew something was wrong. He texted and called his roommate multiple times from work and received no response. David asked a friend to stop by the house and no one answered the door. So David left work to check on Richard. He entered his bedroom and found him lying in bed with his arms over his chest and an eye mask on his face. Richard was dead.
Does it seem a little odd that during this whole time you were wondering why is his car here? I don't know why he's not answering, but you never go to the bedroom door and just kind of knock, knock and slowly turn the handle hey, buddy, hey, are you in here?
Yeah, I thought it was a little strange. As we were going through it, it's 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
Of kind of thinking, well, that's odd. His car's in the garage. He sees that he came home Friday night, but by Monday hadn't seen him.
Right.
So, and it's not like they don't live in the same place. It wouldn't have been that hard to kind of check on him.
Just kind of go down the hallway and turn the knob.
Yeah, I like the fact that when you said it, you actually made a knocking motion and then you made a door turning motion.
I'm very visual.
Just to make sure that I understood exactly what you were talking about.
I know sometimes you don't.
But I'm with you. I did think it was a little strange. After his roommate died, David researched his roommate and found out the truth about his identity and past. He told the Times-Union, I don't know why he did it. I'm sure he had great reasons. David also said in his interview, he lived a very simple life. And that's why I think he was able to just go under the radar. He didn't bother anyone. He was very kind, very helpful. He just was that kind of person, you know?
I think he kind of was that person, and I think he had to be that type of person to make it benefit him to not be picked up on the radar.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It's just like not getting in trouble with police. You also don't want to go around rubbing everybody the wrong way. You don't want to be getting into people's faces and getting in fights, because that's how you get remembered.
Yeah.
So just being kind of a nice guy and flying under the radar, that's the way not to be noticed.
Yeah. And that's the same principle that Whitey Bulger took when he moved out to California.
Absolutely. Didn't work out for him in the end, but yeah. The Times-Union reported that few local business owners recognized Robert's photo when asked about him after his death. One woman who lived across the street from Robert and David said she didn't know who they were, but many neighborhood residents were newcomers to town. David's neighbor knew Robert because they had attended barbecues where Robert cooked for everyone. Officials from the Newtown Police Department announced they had no plans to disclose additional information about Robert and express their sympathies to the family.
Well, they probably didn't have any additional information to disclose.
Hey, and even if they did, they said they weren't going to. But you're right. I mean, what additional information would there be? This guy, Robert Hoagland, left his family. They knew where he went. They, ultimately found out where he had been living, what name he had been living under, where he was working.
Yeah.
Where he was volunteering at a soup kitchen. I don't know what else there would have been to disclose.
And I didn't see anything about any significant other during this 9-year period of time.
No, I didn't either. And I have a couple of thoughts on that. Maybe he just decided that he'd had enough of relationships, didn't need one.
Right.
Or maybe he thought that by getting in a relationship, it would possibly cause him to be found out.
Yeah. It's a risk.
It was a risk that he wasn't willing to take. I don't know. And I don't know that David had partners during this time. So it just seemed like, these guys were there for each other.
Good buddies.
During this 9-10 year period.
Yeah.
But as we wrap this one up, Robert Hoagland's disappearance and death still kind of, remain a mystery.
It does.
Because no one really knows why this normal family man decided to abandon his wife and children and start a new life. It wasn't like it differed all that much from his old life, with the exception that, there was no wife or kids in his life. It wasn't like he was robbing banks or had a ton of money. He was just going to work or
had his other woman
that
he wanted to be with.
Right. I mean, I think that's part of the mystery. You would think there would be some underlying reason that would come to the surface as to why he just decided to up and disappear.
And if you were his wife or kids, wouldn't you almost hope that there was a reason? He wanted to be with this other woman or this other family. Wouldn't like it, but at least it would help you make sense of why he did what he did. Versus, he just got up and left because he didn't want to be around us anymore.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. There have been stories where, let's say a guy has another family and that family is unknown to the family he lives with. That would maybe be a reason you could point to for why he disappeared, changed his name, and maybe he was living with this new family. But like you said, without that kind of big explanation, and you're not going to get it because the guy died. You've got Lori, you've got the kids. They already felt terrible.
Right.
And I think this just kind of adds a level to it because it's still mysterious. They're probably never going to know other than he didn't want to be with them.
Yeah.
And that's not something that's going to make you feel good.
No. I mean, it's an intriguing case. Also tragedy, right? I mean, it's a tragedy that he left his family. It's a tragedy that he died. At the end of the day, the family's still here, and they have to live with the fact that they lost their dad and her husband, but lost him before that because
I was going to say, how do you grieve the death of this man? I'm not saying you don't. I'm just asking the question, how do you do it? Because it's almost like you didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
You thought you did.
I think there'd be some anger there, but
until, he up and left. No one knows why Robert chose to relocate less than 100 miles away from the family and the authorities who were searching for him. I thought that was strange as well.
Sure.
When there was that one sighting in California, that would make sense. Connecticut to California, that's a long ways away.
Right.
But no, he chooses to go just, up the road, 90 minutes.
And I think that one sighting at that one Savor store probably could have been him with the New York tags on his on the plate. But obviously he was very good at keeping off the radar.
Yeah, if you can do it for 10 years plus, then it tells me that he was very disciplined about it. Because I think there are a lot of pitfalls that you could get tripped up, right, every day during that period of time. And he must have been really good at avoiding them. Now, some of that comes from not being around a lot of people and doing that. But then he goes out of his way to volunteer at this soup kitchen and even allows himself to be photographed.
Well, maybe he just had a strong, strong heart, strong
sense of wanting to give back.
Yeah.
And maybe that helped balance out the feelings he had about abandoning his wife and kids.
Yeah, maybe it was his way to try to make it right.
In his mind.
Yeah.
So we just don't know. So as much as we're confused and trying to figure out, I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of Lori and the kids and thinking they had to have been going out of their minds trying to figure out why he did what he did.
I feel for Lori. She was left to pick up all the pieces.
Because at the end of the day, there had to be some motivating factor that caused Robert to want to leave.
Right.
The problem is we don't know what it was. And if the police know, they haven't made it public.
Aliens?
Okay. Sasquatch then. I'll just throw that in there.
Just tossing some,
Except it would be Bigfoot, right? Because we're in North America.
That's right.
But it's just such a strange case. Nobody was killed.
No.
Nobody was physically hurt.
No.
Now you could definitely say that he hurt his family emotionally.
Absolutely.
And who knows how deeply and what toll his actions, ultimately took on them. But it's just one of those very mysterious cases of a guy who just up and left, and we have no idea why.
It never will.
And never will at this point. But that's it for our episode on Robert Hoagland. We got some voicemails, Gib. Do you want to check those out?
Let's hear them.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. This is Ashleah from Laramie, Wyoming. Originally from Chillicothe, Ohio, so not too far from you guys. I was just listening to the latest episode, Adam Emery, and you made a comment that Gibby would have his own restaurant called Gibby, and I just wanted you to know that there is a restaurant in Circleville, Ohio called Gibby's, and it is a sports bar restaurant, and it's pretty good. So maybe Gibby needs to make a little road trip and go meet his kinfolk there in Circleville. So just wanted to let you guys know I love the show. I love the episodes. You guys do a great job, and I just enjoy your content and look forward to more episodes. So y'all stay safe and keep your time ticking. Bye.
All right. Appreciate it. Sounds like a road trip to Circleville.
Yeah. Everybody listening. Circleville at Gibby's.
You don't even know your own name.
Circleville at Gibby's on March. Come up with some date. We all just show up there and make sure they're open first.
And Gibby is buying.
And we're Now see, that's where you ruin it, man.
You can invite people and not pay.
I'll tell you
that's
what.
Wrong.
I'll get the first waters on me.
Okay.
How about that?
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. I'm calling about the Emery case, and I grew up in the town of Jamestown there and was a fisherman. I've actually done that run of towing the net underneath the bridge many times. I just wanted to throw out one other possibility. If you get a bone in the net and you turn it in, they confiscate the whole load. And even if that's not true, most of the fishermen believe that. And so it's entirely under the possibility realm of a fisherman actually dragging that body of Adams up until the end of the fishing tow and discovering the bones and just telling the crew or himself just throwing it off. You got to feed your families. And so now the body would be displaced way up into the bay, and where other nets, because it's the end of the line, aren't going to go. And so I just wanted to throw out that little tidbit. Love the show. I'm Team Mike, and keep your own time ticking. Aloha.
Wow, great voicemail. I love when we get voicemails from people who not only live in the area, but have actually done something that we talked about, for a living or whatever, because that's something you and I would never think about.
No, not at all, but very believable.
Yeah.
I can see that being the reason, I mean, you're not going to want to hand over your catch for the day.
Yeah. Who knows how much money that's worth, but I'm sure it's a tidy sum. So, and it almost sounds like that could have happened a few times, displacing everything, much further down the line. So
to the point it's so far out that it no longer gets picked up.
Yeah. Yeah. So amazing commentary. We really appreciate it. But that is it, buddy, for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
Pluto TV is as easy as it is free, and it's totally free. With over 300 channels and thousands of TV shows and movies, finding what you love has never been easier. Just open the app and something good will already be playing. Because it's curated by real humans who love TV as much as you do. So you'll spend a lot less time scrolling and a whole lot more time watching. That's why Pluto TV is TV the way it should be. All you need to do is download the app and start streaming. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.